Hi, and in this video what I want to do is to discuss something that was said at Blizzcon in a bit more detail. In this particular case it's going to be talents. Now they said a couple of things about talents. So what I want to cover in this video is first of all what's wrong with talent as Blizzard see it, not my opinion, although it's not actually different in this case. What Blizzard want to do about it, what I think are the positives and the negatives of the way they want to deal with it, and then to discuss whether or not it's the actual talent system, which has changed in World of Warcraft's history before, that's actually at fault for the issues that we have now. So what is it about talents that the Blizzard developers currently don't like? In a nutshell, it is simply this. There are some talents in particular rows which we always take. For Retribution Paladins, Crusade, for Havoc Demon Hunters, Momentum, for Shadow Priest, Surrender to Madness, and so on. Blizzard are not keen on this. They want to see equal viability, and I suppose the way they will see that is equal use of all the talents in each of the rows. So what they want to do is to, first of all, they said for some talents it's just a case of retuning. In other words, numbers, just fiddling the numbers. For other ones, it will require more of a redesign. Now, there are a number of positives and negatives to this. The first positive is fairly obvious. No one likes to see a dead talent. But then this sort of leads into a negative as well, because if you look at all the talents that are ubiquitous, in other words, people are just always taking that talent, almost doesn't matter what content they're doing, they're just always taking it. During beta and even alpha with a lot of these cases, that same information was communicated to the developers via feedback. Those of us who were testing in alpha and beta, we were all saying, well, everyone's just going to take this talent because the other two are just not viable. Similarly, when it comes to talents that, because sometimes you have a row where two of the talents, sometimes you use one, sometimes you use another. Sometimes it's just that some people use one and some people use another. But then there's that one talent that just no one takes. And they want to shore up that as well. And again, where those talents exist, those dead talents that just don't ever get used ever, the data, it wasn't just us feeding back going, we don't like these talents. The actual data was there to say, look, in these are the realistic situations we come across in World of Warcraft. It's not, you wouldn't take it in any of them because there's always a better one. One of the other two is always better. So that feedback was coming through. So first of all, I have to ask myself, if they actually want to do something about this, why didn't they do something about it months ago? Now, the answer could be, this is pure speculation, by the way, I haven't got a clue. The answer could be that maybe Tom Chilton, who was the director of World of Warcraft at the time, until very recently, didn't care. And maybe Ian Hazakostas, who was the assistant game director and now is the actual game director of World of Warcraft, does care. And so maybe it's the change in leadership that has created this sort of difference, perhaps. I hope that's the case, because otherwise the alternative is that it was just too much for them. They can't actually manage the development process of World of Warcraft. That would be a worrying thought to have. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with change of leadership has changed the sort of design philosophy. Okay, that's fine. I don't think you're going to get too many complaints. But you could get some complaints, because there's actually a lot of... I mean, how many times do you see on forums, how many times have you asked yourself, what are the talents to take? What talent should I take between this and this? As if there's a universal answer. Now, of course, sometimes there is a universal answer. And that's the problem. That's one of the problems they want to address. But then you think to yourself, do the players actually care about that? Are players really all that bothered about talents? Some, of course, are. But are the majority? Because if the majority were really enthused by the whole point of talents, which is supposed to be about choice, to suit your personal playstyle, or to suit the encounter, then people wouldn't ask, what talent should I take? They'd be more involved in the process themselves and actually think to themselves, well, I don't care what talents you take because I want to take this one, because that's what Blizzard would like. But is it realistic? No. Because in any given situation, one talent will always come out mathematically better than the other. Now, it's not necessarily dependent on the encounter. I think this is where some people get a bit confused with talent. They think it's to do with the encounter. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's down to the player. So I have just, for example, switched There was a particular 2 talents that I always took on every fight through Emerald Nightmare. And yesterday when we were farming it, I took a different 2 talents. But that's not because the encounters have changed. It's not because these talents are better with the shorter duration fights, which we are having, and for which I simmed as well. No, it's more because the change in my stats as my gear's improved has determined that I will actually use these other 2 instead. They've just suddenly got better. And they were already creeping up that way anyway. So it's down to the player, the character that you've got, as well as the encounter to think about. Now, what's another little worry? Here is the big worry for me. Because changing talents during testing is fine. That's what you should do. You bring out the talents and people provide their feedback and you stroke your beard and think, yeah, we need to change that. And then you change that. More testing, more feedback, and you refine it. And by the time the game launches, you've got it. It's sort of all right. It's not going to be perfect, but it's sort of there. There is a problem when you have to do this mid-expansion, okay? Because we're now into progress. We're in a situation now where if you get it slightly wrong, and anyone can get it slightly wrong, it's not incompetent of developers just to get something a bit wrong. And this will happen a lot. So they get something a little bit wrong and it suddenly catapults one spec or class, to being almost essential in a raid if you want to progress. And another one becomes all but useless. These are actual players you're messing with here. So you can create in a situation where actual players can find themselves not being effective enough within their own group. Just on a sudden change. Not something they knew about when the expansion launched and had time to switch class or spec, if they are the sort of person that's happy doing that. But it's mid-progress. You're mid-progress and suddenly you're bringing this thing out. We're into the expansion. It's a very, very dangerous game to play. Now, of course, the argument would be straight away, well, they're going to put it on the PTR first. Yes, of course. But the PTR doesn't last as long as, say, Alpha and Beta. So if they're going to, and I don't mean, numbers tuning is one thing. There's enough time when the PTR is up to do that. But when you're going to redesign a talent, I would say not, because what will happen is you redesign a talent, you put it on the PTR. First of all, there's not actually that many people playing it, because one other thing I go back to, why didn't they respond to the feedback? Positive, they did respond to the feedback, but their feedback, whenever we were saying this talent will never be taken, or this talent is useless, their response literally was, great, take another talent. Whereas now it's completely the other way. It's like they're now sort of basically saying, oh yeah, that's a problem, we should address it. So what will happen is they'll put a talent on PTR. There's very few people doing it. Now, they liked big data. They like a lot of data, like a lot of people playing it and feeding back. They're not going to get that on PTR. But they will get some, and they will get some very highly specialized and well thought out feedback on the PTR. Now, let's say they respond to that positively and they make another change. Well, that comes out a few weeks later, doesn't it? And you keep tweaking it, and before you know it, everything else as far as developers are concerned is done, apart from some talents for some classes and specs. And let's say they go and launch it anyway. What do? Do they just revert so there's no change when that patch comes out? Just as happened with some talents when 7.1 came out? In which case they've not made their design aims of making sure that all talents are equally viable. Or do they just go with it anyway and say to hell with it, in which case they're potentially knackering a lot of players? It's a very dangerous road to take. I personally, if it was me, would take the view that what we need to do is think about something for the next expansion. Once you've launched with a set of talents, yes, you can tune them a little bit. And they should tune some of them a little bit. But in terms of actual redesigns, I think you have to tread very, very carefully. Very carefully indeed. Because it's very, very easy to get it a bit wrong. So then I come on to, what is the problem in the first place? Is it the actual talent system? Or is it, it's one of two things. As far as I'm concerned, it's one of two things. I'll come straight out with it. Either it's the way talents work, or it's a disconnect between what the developers want from talents and what the players want from talents. Because what the developers are quite clear about what they want. The players less so, because we don't do surveys, as in Blizzard don't do surveys. I'm using the royal we there. So what Blizzard want is that there's some choice, and that sometimes we'll take this talent, sometimes we'll take this, or we'll take talents according to our preferred playstyle. In other words, we won't see a cookie cutter build. They changed the way talents work in Mr. Pandaria to get away from this cookie cutter build of the old system, whereas we now have it again. I would say it's not as bad actually in Legion. I think they've done a better job in Legion, but it's still there. It's still there to a certain extent, to a lesser extent, but still. But if, on the other hand, the player base is not that bothered, because remember, a lot of players just want to know what are the best talents for this fight. They don't really want anything else. They don't really want the choice. And then you have to come back to another thing Blizzard said, which I think is a little at odds with it. They said they deliberately made... Now, I'm not sure I entirely believe this, by the way, but they did say that they made talents deliberately difficult to change in terms of the fact that we can't change them wherever we like anymore, unless we use expensive tomes. They made it difficult to change them, so because they didn't want us changing talents all the time. Now, there's two things in that. First of all, that goes against the original intention for the new talent system. Because when the new talent system came out in MOP, they actually said they want us changing talents from fight to fight. That was what they said. So when you change that overall philosophy, straight away, surely you ought to be thinking, okay, so if our philosophy is going to change, which is fine, change the philosophy, okay, that's good. Surely we have to change the system, because the system inherently is going to be problematic now. Because the system we're using now was designed for a different philosophy. The other problem with it is, if you're going to create all these talents and they're all going to be sort of close together, sorry, but on one fight, one's going to come out stronger. Even if it's sort of already also dependent upon the stats you have on your character. I'm not saying it'll always be the same for every single player. But for you, as an individual with your character, in the particular state it's in the guild it's in, with the role you're going to take on that fight, there will be one talent that is just better. On the next fight, it'll be another talent that's better. On another fight, it'll be the other one. So, on the one hand, they're saying they don't want us changing talents very often. And then on the other hand, they're saying they're going to put something in place that will mean we'll have to change talents very often. The two things are working against each other, and I don't like design philosophies that work against each other. I just don't like it. As a scientist, I'm always very much interested in simpler things. Things need to make sense. I mean, there are theories in science, in modern science, such as string theory, for example, where the reason physicists don't like it is not because it doesn't work. It's just because it's not elegant. It's not nice. It doesn't make sense. And it's just ugly and clumsy. So I have the same sort of view, because that's my training. If something is working against something else, it's not good. It's not good. So then we think about a system, because obviously it's not easy to think of a system that would be better. We had the talent trees, where you just pick a talent each thing. And yeah, everyone sort of picked the same. That wasn't good. We now have this new system, which was okay when it was in MOP with that old design philosophy, but is not going to be good for this new one. So then we think about other systems. Now, there's two that spring to mind. And again, I'm taking this from where they've already existed, rather than I'm not coming up with them myself, because I've just thought of them, just coming off the top of my head. The first one is a little bit like in Elder Scrolls Online, where it's what I've come up with two extremes. This is where you can't really change talents at all. I haven't. I'm talking about when it first came out. I'm not going to talk about Elder Scrolls Online now. If anyone plays it and goes, no, it's not like that anymore. I know there's been a lot of changes, but I hardly ever get to play it, so I don't know what they are. But the idea that your sort of talents as such, which the sky shards, and you allocate them into different places. And it could even include professions, by the way. So it'd be like, good, you spend these points on these professions, and you can almost imagine there's like a map. When you open your talent page, instead of rows or trees or anything, it's just a map with different things. And each talent costs a certain number of talent points. So the really powerful ones will cost more than ones that are just basic use. And it doesn't just have to be for stuff for your combat either. It could be for professions and things like that. There could be one for mounted speed or just passive movement speed. There could be all sorts of different ones. And you have a certain number of talent points based on your level, just like in the original days. But instead of having to go down a path, you just pick ones. Now, obviously, the advantage of that is that you're sort of customizing your character by making it really, really difficult to change them, if you even can at all. Well, you would have to in WoW, I think. You're getting people to really think about what they want to do. So if you're more into professions and you just do casual raiding and stuff like that, then maybe you put more of them into things that boost your ability as a crafter. And if you're more into PvE, maybe there's some obvious ones for that in PvP. Well, we've got PvP talents anyway. Forget about PvP. Sod PvP. Sorry for PvPers, but never mind. Now, the problem with that, of course, is you would create a situation where hitherto, maybe two talents, which seems fairly innocuous in themselves, they're perfectly reasonable talents, suddenly breaks the game in combination with each other. That would be one potential problem with that system. Now, then the other system I was thinking of is one that exists in World of Warcraft now. It's been introduced in Legion. And it's a system that I haven't heard a lot of people complaining about. In fact, I haven't really heard any serious complaints at all about it. And it's a system we're not going to have in the next expansion because it was just brought in for Legion. And I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't this work? And that is the artifact trait system. Let's say talents, instead of choice, were like the artifact traits, which we're getting rid of in the next expansion anyway. And what you do is you choose paths, so you have got paths now. And the idea is that over time you'll get all of them anyway. So it's not like choosing. So no one cares about the cookie cutter build anymore because everyone will just have all of them anyway. And every time a new expansion comes out, a new layer. So it's a bit like the old talent things, except you'll have enough points to eventually get all of them. Because when I said based on your level, that's up to a certain point. What you then do is get, just like we have artifact power now, which is a really good system. It has success. That has done what it intended to do in terms of getting us to do content we might not otherwise have done as much as we've done. World quests, dungeons, LFR raids, whatever. I don't think we get it from LFR, do we? Don't care. Get it from everything else. And PvP indeed as well. So it encourages us to do all those as well. And that could be baked in. That could be the new talent system. So we choose the path. There's these different paths because it's going to take a certain amount of time over the course of an expansion to build it up. And then when the next expansion starts up, it could just fill up that expansion's worth of thing. Or you could just redo them, whatever you wanted to do. And, that's to me would seem to work reasonably. I'm not saying that's the answer, by the way, but it's an interesting thought. But what I'd definitely want to see happen is I hope that Blizzard, at least internally, do discuss, when they're thinking about the talent system, think to themselves, well, we've changed what we wanted from the talent system now, so should we change the way the talent system actually works? Because I do have major concerns that I just don't think that what they want from talents now can be delivered from the talent system. So I do think it ought to be changed. And I wouldn't mind it changing to, the artifact system, the artifact trait system, because, like I said, we're not going to have it. We're not going to have any other use for it. The advantages are no one's complained about the artifact trait system. And the other thing is, it would mean that in the next expansion, instead of collecting artifact points, we can collect talent points in exactly the same way. It's exactly the same mechanic. And it will encourage us to do exactly the same sort of things that Blizzard want to encourage us to do. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Maybe you've got other ones. Maybe you've got better systems. Maybe you like the current system. Maybe you think Blizzard will be able to deliver on it. I'm not sure. But hopefully at least you found it interesting. If you did, as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.